Millionaire CEO walked in by fate. One glance at a black woman changed his life forever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. John Mitchell was not someone who believed in fate. As a millionaire CEO of a tech company, he was all about strategy, plans, and control. His life was meticulously organized, everything in its place, all of it tied to one purpose: success. John had built his empire from the ground up. From late nights in his cramped apartment to boardrooms filled with billion-dollar deals, he had seen and experienced it all. But despite all the wealth and prestige, something was missing. John found himself at a crossroads, exhausted by the endless chase for more. Even surrounded by luxury, he felt a deep emptiness that money couldn't fill. Every day, he woke up to the same routine, the same cold world of numbers and targets. But all that was about to change in a way he never expected. It started with an event, one that John usually wouldn't have bothered attending. A high-profile charity gala in downtown New York. His presence was requested by business associates, not because of his genuine interest, but because it was a networking opportunity, and that's what John did best. It was a night just like any other, until his eyes met hers. Lena Harris was unlike anyone John had ever seen before. She wasn't there for the glitz or glamour. She wasn't trying to make connections or chase the same hollow dreams that so many others in the room were after. Lena had a quiet strength about her, one that John could sense even from a distance. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. There was something in her presence that made everything else fade away. As soon as their eyes met, time seemed to slow for John. For a brief moment, it was as if the noise of the gala, the flashing lights, and the crowded room all disappeared. His mind was no longer occupied by quarterly profits or the next big deal. In that instant, everything he thought he knew about life seemed irrelevant. Something deep inside him stirred, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. A spark of curiosity, a flicker of hope, or maybe even a glimpse of change. And just like that, his life was no longer about what it had been. That one glance from Lena, a woman he hadn't even spoken to yet, was about to alter everything John Mitchell thought he understood about himself, his world, and the path ahead. John stood there for a moment, lost in the feeling that had suddenly overtaken him. The music, the laughter, the chatter around him all seemed to fade into the background. It was as if the universe had paused, just for him. He had never felt anything like this before. He had met countless people over the years, but none of them had ever made him feel this way. His heart raced, not from excitement or anxiety, but from something deeper, something unfamiliar. He couldn't tear his eyes away from Lena, even though she wasn't looking at him anymore. She was talking to someone else now, laughing softly. John tried to shake the feeling off. He was a successful businessman. After all, not some love-struck teenager. But there was something about her. It was the way she carried herself, the confidence in her smile, the light in her eyes. Lena Harris wasn't just beautiful. She was different. John had always prided himself on his ability to stay focused, to keep his emotions in check. But tonight, it was as if every rule he had lived by no longer applied. He turned his back to the crowd and walked toward the bar, needing to collect his thoughts. As he stood there, nursing his drink, he couldn't help but glance back toward Lena. She was still talking, still laughing, and for some reason, that made him feel both calm and restless at the same time. Was it her energy? Her charisma? John couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to meet her. He hadn't felt this kind of pull in years, maybe ever. The urge to know her, to understand what made her tick, to find out what had sparked. This strange feeling in him was overwhelming, but he wasn't sure how to approach her. He was a millionaire CEO, accustomed to making deals and shaking hands with the most powerful people in the world. But this was different. Lena was different. After what felt like an eternity, John finally made his way over to her. He wasn't sure what to expect, but as he approached, he was greeted by her warm smile, one that instantly put him at ease. "Hi, I'm John," he said, trying to sound casual, though his voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. Lena looked up at him, her smile widening as she extended her hand. "Lena," she replied, her voice soft yet confident. There was something in her eyes that made John feel like she could see right through him, as if she understood him on a level no one else did. They exchanged pleasantries, but John found himself hanging on to every word she said, captivated by the way she spoke, by the way she carried herself with such grace and authenticity. It wasn't just her beauty, although she was undoubtedly stunning. It was something deeper, something real. As they talked, John realized that he was starting to open up in ways he never had before. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just talking about business or success. He was talking about life, about meaning, about the things that truly mattered. And for some strange reason, it felt right. He had spent so many years chasing success, believing that it would fill the void inside him. But in that moment, talking to Lena, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if he had been chasing the wrong things all along. The conversation flowed easily, effortlessly, as if they had known each other for years. John found himself laughing, something he hadn't done in ages. The walls he had built around himself began to crumble, piece by piece. Lena's presence made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. And as the night went on, John knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could have anticipated. The following days after the gala, John couldn't get Lena out of his mind. He thought about her constantly, her smile, the way she spoke, the energy she exuded. It wasn't just physical attraction. It was more than that. Lena represented something he hadn't even realized he was missing: authenticity, depth, a connection to something real. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had a conversation that felt so easy, so meaningful. The business meetings, the calls, the endless pursuit of success. It all seemed so shallow now, as if he had been living in a world made of glass, fragile and empty. John found himself waking up each morning with a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in years. But it wasn't the kind of purpose he was used to. It wasn't about achieving more or making more money. It was about understanding people, connecting with them, and discovering what truly made life worth living. That night at the gala had shifted something inside him. It was as if Lena had opened a door that John didn't even know existed. And he couldn't stop thinking about the possibility of what could happen if he explored that door further. He knew he had to see her again. But John wasn't the kind of man to chase after someone without a plan. He was used to taking control, to making things happen. So he reached out. He sent Lena a message, casual but sincere, asking if she would like to meet for coffee sometime. To his relief, she responded almost immediately, agreeing to meet at a cozy cafe downtown. The meeting was set for the following week. John couldn't stop himself from feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. What if it was all just a fleeting feeling? What if he had built it up in his head too much? But as the day approached, his curiosity only grew. He arrived early, wanting to make a good impression. As he sat at the table, waiting, he couldn't help but wonder what this meeting would be like. Would it be just another casual conversation, or would it be something more? When Lena walked in, the moment felt like a scene from a movie. The sunlight streaming through the cafe windows made her look even more radiant. She smiled as soon as she saw him, and it felt like everything else in the room faded into the background. There was an ease between them, as if they had known each other far longer than just a few days. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and for the first time in a long time, John didn't feel like he was performing. He didn't feel the need to impress or to hide behind the walls he had built over the years. With Lena, he could just be himself. She asked him questions about his life, his work, his passions, and John realized that he was opening up in ways he hadn't even known he could. Lena, too, shared pieces of her life. She spoke about the challenges she had faced, the obstacles she had overcome, and the dreams she still carried with her. John was struck by her resilience, her unwavering belief in herself despite everything life had thrown at her. As the conversation unfolded, John realized that this was what he had been searching for all along, a connection that was real, that went beyond surface-level interactions. It wasn't about business deals or networking opportunities. It was about something much deeper, a shared understanding of the complexities of life, the highs and lows, the triumphs and struggles. And with every word Lena spoke, John felt more and more drawn to her, not just as a woman, but as a person who had a unique story, a powerful perspective on the world. By the time they parted ways that afternoon, John knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something far more meaningful than he had ever imagined. John couldn't stop thinking about Lena after their coffee date. The connection they had felt so natural, so easy. It was as if they had known each other for years, even though their paths had only crossed recently. The more he reflected on their conversation, the more he realized how much he had been missing in his own life. It wasn't just the warmth of her smile or the way she made him feel at ease. It was the way she saw the world, the way she thought about life and people. Lena had a depth to her that John wasn't used to. She spoke with such clarity and passion about her beliefs, her experiences, and her vision for the future. She wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo, to stand up for what she believed in. And John admired that. He had spent so many years building his empire, focusing on success, power, and status. But Lena made him realize that there was more to life than that. For the first time in a long time, John felt like he was looking at the world through a different lens. He wasn't sure what it was about Lena that had this effect on him. Maybe it was her strength, her resilience, or the way she seemed so grounded, even in a world that often felt chaotic. Whatever it was, it had changed him. After their coffee date, John found himself wanting to learn more about her, to understand her better. He started to look forward to their conversations, to the moments when they could share their thoughts, their dreams, and their fears. Lena made him feel like he wasn't alone in this world, like there was someone who truly understood him. And as time went on, he found himself drawn to her more and more. But even though John felt a strong connection with Lena, he knew that he couldn't rush into anything. He had been so focused on his career for so long that he had forgotten what it meant to take things slow, to allow a relationship to unfold naturally. So he took his time. They saw each other a few more times over the following weeks, always meeting in quiet places, where they could talk without distractions. Their conversations ranged from light-hearted topics to deep, meaningful discussions about life, love, and everything in between. John found himself opening up in ways he hadn't before. He shared his fears, his insecurities, and the struggles he had faced throughout his life. Lena listened, never judging, always supportive. And with each conversation, John felt like he was shedding the layers he had built around himself, the walls he had put up to protect himself from getting hurt. But what surprised John the most was how much he was learning from Lena. It wasn't just about how to live a more authentic life or how to embrace vulnerability. It was about understanding the world in a way he had never seen before. Lena's perspective on race, on social issues, and on what it meant to truly live a meaningful life opened John's eyes in ways he couldn't have imagined. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly growing, not just as a businessman, but as a person. And it was all because of Lena, the woman who had walked into his life and changed it forever. As the weeks passed, John and Lena's connection deepened in ways that neither of them had anticipated. It wasn't just the chemistry between them, though that was undeniable. It was the way they both brought something out of each other that had long been dormant. John had spent so many years focused solely on his career, pushing himself to the limits to build his empire. But with Lena, he began to see the world in a different light. She made him realize that there was more to life than just achievements and status. Lena's influence began to shape the way he viewed the people around him, especially those who had always been part of his business world. He started questioning his priorities, asking himself what really mattered. Lena's insights on compassion, empathy, and authenticity began to resonate deeply with him. She often talked about how important it was to stay true to oneself, no matter what society expected. That idea was foreign to John at first, but the more he listened to Lena, the more he understood how much he had been missing out on by living in a bubble of wealth and success. He realized that he had been so focused on building his company, making more money, and achieving more recognition, that he had forgotten to connect with the people around him in a genuine way. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about creating real relationships, understanding people's struggles, and making a meaningful impact on the world. One evening, after a particularly intense conversation with Lena about the struggles of underprivileged communities, John found himself reflecting on his own life. He had been given so much: wealth, opportunity, and privilege. But what had he done with it? He had spent so much time accumulating more, yet he had never stopped to think about how he could use his position to help others. That night, John made a decision. He wanted to give back. He wanted to use his success to make a real difference in the world. The next day, he met with his board of directors and proposed a new initiative for his company. He wanted to shift its focus from purely profit-driven goals to projects that could help support education, healthcare, and social justice in underserved communities. His vision was to create a company that not only thrived financially, but also made a positive impact on society. The board was initially skeptical, but John was persistent. He shared his personal journey, how his connection with Lena had opened his eyes to the importance of using one's resources for a greater good. He explained that this was no longer just about making money for the sake of it. It was about making a difference, leaving a legacy. Slowly, the board began to warm to the idea. They could see the passion in John's eyes, the sincerity in his voice. They knew that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of inspiration. John was serious about this change. As the weeks turned into months, John's company started to shift its focus. They launched initiatives to support local communities, created scholarships for underprivileged students, and partnered with nonprofits to provide access to healthcare in underserved areas. And throughout it all, Lena stood by his side. She wasn't just his inspiration. She was his partner, his sounding board, and his greatest supporter. Her belief in him, in the work they were doing, made all the difference. It wasn't just the success of his company that mattered anymore. It was the impact they were making together. John knew that the man he was today, the man who was finally starting to live authentically, was the result of meeting Lena. She had changed his life in ways he never could have imagined, and now he was determined to pay that forward, to use his resources to help those who needed it most. John's life had taken a turn that he never could have imagined. As his company began to embrace a more socially conscious mission, he found himself more fulfilled than ever before. The projects they had launched were beginning to show real results. Scholarships were being awarded to bright students who had previously been overlooked. Healthcare initiatives were giving access to the underserved. And John felt an overwhelming sense of purpose every time he saw the positive impact they were making. He could never have predicted that a chance meeting with Lena at a charity gala would lead him to this place. But now, as he watched the transformation unfold, he knew it was the right path. However, the changes weren't just professional. John found himself becoming a different person personally as well. He started spending more time with his family, reaching out to old friends, and rekindling relationships that had faded into the background during the years he had been so focused on work. He had rediscovered the joy of connecting with people, something he had almost forgotten existed. Lena had encouraged him to embrace these deeper relationships. She would often remind him that success wasn't just about numbers, but about the lives you touched along the way. One evening, after another productive day at the office, John sat on his balcony overlooking the city. It was quiet, the bustling sounds of New York replaced by the soft hum of the evening. Lena had just left his apartment, after spending hours brainstorming new ideas for their next charity project. She had become more than just his business partner. She had become his confidant, his best friend, and someone he could trust with his deepest thoughts. It was during this quiet moment that John realized something. His feelings for Lena had grown deeper than he had ever expected. He hadn't intended for this to happen. He had admired her from the moment they met. Yes, but he hadn't expected his admiration to turn into something more. His feelings for her were not just based on her intelligence, her passion, or her beauty. It was the way she saw the world, the way she made him feel alive and connected to something bigger than himself. As John thought about this realization, he felt a wave of uncertainty. What did this mean for their partnership? Could he risk complicating things by admitting how he felt? They had built so much together, and the last thing he wanted was to jeopardize their work by crossing that line. But at the same time, he couldn't deny the connection between them. He had been avoiding it for weeks, but now, in the quiet of his apartment, it seemed impossible to ignore. The next day, John and Lena met for their usual brainstorming session. As they sat across from each other, John couldn't help but feel nervous. He had made the decision to tell her how he felt, to be honest with her about the emotions that had been building up inside him. He took a deep breath before speaking, unsure of how to begin. "Lena, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice a little shaky. Lena looked up at him, her eyes calm but attentive. "What is it, John?" she asked, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he continued, "about everything we've built together. And I realize that my feelings for you have changed. It's not just business anymore. I care about you. more than I ever thought possible." Lena's expression softened. She didn't interrupt him, allowing him to say everything he needed to say. When he finished, there was a long silence. John held his breath, waiting for her response, unsure of what she would say. Finally, Lena spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "John, I care about you too. But we've built something incredible together, and I don't want to jeopardize that. Let's take things slow and see where this goes, but we have to be careful. Our work is too important." John felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't a rejection, but it wasn't a full embrace either. It was a chance to explore what was between them, without rushing into anything. He nodded, understanding. "I can do that," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "We'll take it one step at a time." As they continued their conversation, the tension between them seemed to lift, replaced by a new understanding. John knew that whatever happened next, their bond, both personal and professional, would continue to grow stronger. And with Lena by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. As the months went by, John and Lena continued to grow both personally and professionally. Their relationship was one of mutual respect and understanding, built on a foundation of trust and shared goals. They had successfully navigated the complexities of balancing their personal feelings with their professional aspirations, and it was becoming increasingly clear that they were better together than apart. Their company was thriving, and the impact of their initiatives was being felt across communities. The scholarships, healthcare programs, and social justice projects they had championed were beginning to change lives. John's vision for a socially conscious business had become a reality, and Lena's influence had been instrumental in making that happen. As they worked side by side, John often marveled at how much he had grown. He had always been a driven person, but now he found himself driven by a deeper purpose. It wasn't about success for the sake of success. It was about creating lasting change, about making a difference in people's lives. And with Lena by his side, he felt that every decision they made was guided by a sense of purpose and integrity. But even as their professional lives soared, John couldn't ignore the growing bond between them. He had never felt this way about anyone before. It was more than just admiration or affection. It was a deep emotional connection, one that he had tried to keep in check for fear of jeopardizing everything they had worked for. Yet, as time went on, John realized that the love he felt for Lena wasn't something he could ignore. It wasn't just about their work or their shared passions. It was about who they were as individuals, and how they complemented each other in ways that made both of them better. One evening, after a long day of meetings and discussions, John and Lena found themselves alone in the office, wrapping up their work for the day. The city lights outside the windows cast a soft glow, and the quiet hum of the office made it feel like they were the only two people in the world. Lena stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. John watched her for a moment, his thoughts racing. He had come to a decision. It was time to be honest with her, to share how he truly felt. He walked over to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Lena," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion, "I can't keep pretending that this is just about business anymore. I care about you more than I ever expected, and I think you know that. I can't imagine my life without you in it." Lena turned to face him, her eyes soft and understanding. She had always known that there was something more between them, but she had respected the boundaries they had set for themselves. She had seen how hard John had worked to build not just a successful company, but a meaningful life, and she had never wanted to be the one to complicate that. But now, standing in front of him, she knew that they were both ready for the next step. "John," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I care about you, too. I've known for a while now that what we have is something special, but we've built something incredible together, and I don't want to rush anything. Let's take our time and see where this goes." There was a moment of silence as John processed her words. He felt a surge of relief and joy. It wasn't a rejection, it was an affirmation that they were on the same page. They both wanted the same thing, but they were willing to take it slow and let it unfold naturally. As they stood there in the quiet of the office, John felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He had come to understand that love wasn't something you could force or rush. It was something that had to grow at its own pace, in its own time. And with Lena by his side, he was ready to embrace whatever came next. Together, they had already achieved so much. And now, they were ready to face the future, hand in hand, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As time passed, John and Lena's partnership continued to flourish, both in their professional lives and their personal connection. The company had grown into a well-respected force for social good, and its projects were expanding into new cities, bringing opportunities to people who had never had access to them before. John was proud of the work they had done, but even more proud of how he had changed as a person. Lena had helped him see the world in a way he never thought possible, and their relationship was now the foundation on which everything else stood. They had learned to navigate the delicate balance of being business partners and something more. There were still challenges to face, of course. Running a business with such a strong social focus came with its own set of hurdles. There were days when the pressure felt overwhelming, when deadlines loomed large and resources were stretched thin. But through it all, John and Lena had each other. Their bond had become a source of strength, something they could rely on when everything else seemed uncertain. One evening, as they worked late in the office, John paused for a moment and looked across the room at Lena. She was focused, her brow furrowed as she reviewed a report, but there was a softness in the way she held herself. In that moment, John realized that he had fallen in love with her in ways he hadn't even fully understood. It wasn't just the way she looked or the way she spoke, though both were beautiful. It was the way she approached life with such passion and clarity, the way she made him believe that anything was possible if they worked together. He had come a long way from the man he had been when they first met. Back then, his life had been defined by success and status, but now, it was about something far more meaningful. It was about making a difference, building a life that mattered, and finding joy in the small moments. As the months went by, they found themselves not just partners in business, but partners in life. They spent time together outside of the office, exploring new places, meeting new people, and sharing experiences that deepened their connection. John had never been someone to take risks when it came to relationships, but with Lena, everything felt different. It felt right. And as much as they had both agreed to take things slowly, it was clear that they were ready for the next step. One evening, after a particularly productive day, they took a walk in the park near John's apartment. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the trees. As they walked in silence, John reached for Lena's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, John felt truly at peace. "I've been thinking," John began, his voice steady but full of emotion, "about everything we've built, everything we've worked for. And I know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Not just as business partners, but as partners in everything." Lena stopped walking, turning to face him. Her expression was gentle, her eyes filled with warmth. She squeezed his hand, her voice soft but sure. "John, I've known for a long time that we were meant to do this together. But I've also learned that it's not just about the work we do. It's about who we are with each other. And I want that too." A wave of relief washed over John, and in that moment he realized how much he had come to depend on Lena, not just in business, but in life. They had both transformed in ways that neither could have anticipated, and now they were ready to take the next step, hand in hand, toward a future full of possibilities. Together, they were unstoppable. As the seasons changed, so did John and Lena's relationship. Their bond, both professional and personal, continued to evolve. They had become a powerhouse duo in every sense of the word. Not only had they built a thriving business, but they had created something much more profound, a partnership that was rooted in trust, love, and shared vision. The work they were doing was making a real difference, and every day, they felt more inspired to push further, to do more. Their company had expanded to new regions, bringing their social initiatives to communities across the country. They were not just seen as business leaders, but as changemakers, people who were willing to challenge the status quo and fight for what was right. John had never imagined that his life would take this turn. He had once been driven solely by the pursuit of success, by the need to prove himself in the world of business. But now, he realized that his true purpose was so much more than that. It was about leaving a lasting legacy, about creating opportunities for others, and about living a life that was meaningful. Lena had been the catalyst for this transformation. Her influence on him had been profound, and he knew that he would never be the same person again. As their professional success grew, so did their personal connection. They spent more time together outside of work, enjoying quiet moments in each other's company, exploring new places, and building memories that would last a lifetime. And yet, there was still so much more to explore. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their apartment, overlooking the city lights, John turned to Lena with a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know," he began, his voice tinged with emotion, "I've been thinking a lot about how far we've come and what we've built together. And it's amazing, but I know that the best is yet to come. There's so much more we can do, so many lives we can touch, and so many dreams we can turn into reality." Lena looked at him, her eyes filled with love and admiration. She had always known that John had the potential to do great things, but she had never imagined that they would be doing them together. "I agree," she said softly, her hand reaching for his. "We've only just begun, and I know that we're capable of even more. I'm so proud of everything we've accomplished, but I'm even more excited for what's ahead." They sat in silence for a few moments, allowing the weight of their words to sink in. John felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey they had been on together, for the woman who had helped him become the person he was today, and for the future they were building together. He turned to Lena, his heart full of love. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "For everything. For believing in me, for helping me see the world in a new way, for making me want to be better." Lena smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. "You've always had it in you, John. I just helped you see it." As they embraced, the world outside seemed to fade away. In that moment, nothing else mattered but the love they shared and the incredible journey that lay ahead of them. Together, they had already accomplished so much. But the best part was that they knew, without a doubt, that the greatest adventures were still to come. And no matter what the future held, they would face it together, hand in hand.